Holy smokes. The official countdown has begun for CMMC to go live. This is exciting. There was breaking news yesterday that the CMMC Final Rule, that's the Title 48 CFR rule, which is essentially gives guidance to those contracting officers and gives them authority to insert CMMC into DoD solicitations, is currently at the Office of Management and Budget. So that's the White House. Once they review it, and then it go after that, send it back to DoD. If there's no changes, DoD will post the CMMC Final Rule in the Federal Register. And then typically once it's posted in the Federal Register, 60 days after that post date, it's in effect. It's essentially law. That's when the DoD will start their phase rollout, the CMMC requirements. So the full program. If you all are not compliance geeks, not deep into CMMC world like myself, then you may be wondering, I thought CMMC was already final. My wife asked that same question when I told her this news yesterday, and I was doing cartwheels and backflips and breakdancing. She's like, "Why are you so excited?" I'm like, "CMMC, it's almost final now." You've been saying that for 2 years. Like, I thought last October you said that was the final rule. That is true, but that's where it gets a little confusing. I'm going to break it all down for you in this video so I can cut through all of the fluff. You know exactly what you need to know, what you need to do as defense contractors. Really, it starts off with understanding that there are two rules that the DoD was doing. And one of them was the CMMC program rule. That was a 32 CFR Part 170. So that outlined all of the requirements for the CMMC program. That's the meat and potatoes of the CMMC program. The last component of it was this Title 48 CFR rule, which pretty much is for the solicitations. That DFARS, which is going to be the DFARS 7021 clause, which is going to be inserted into those DoD solicitations. So that's the last component of it. Really the thing about the administrative proportions. This is the one that is currently at the Office of Management and Budget. So once that's final in the Federal Register, 60 days after, at that point now contracting officers have the authority to start rolling out the CMMC program, making it mandatory for all defense contractors. Keep in mind, if you're new to federal contracting, the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, that only applies to defense contractors. So that DFARS, that only applies to defense contractors. However, the CMMC program is based on and really enforcing the NIST SP 800-171 requirements, which applies to any federal contractor, any system that's handling controlled unclassified information, non-federal systems. So that applies to all federal contractors, and also for FCI, that FAR 21 rule, that applies to all federal contractors as well. Just think of it this way. The DoD is really leading the charge in the federal government, where they're going to be requiring verification of compliance with the requirements. But I anticipate that other federal agencies are either going to adopt something similar to CMMC or perhaps even adopt CMMC. We'll see what happens with that CUI rule that's going through as far as FAR. But that's the topic or video for another day. As I promised, I'm going to walk you through all the steps. Let's jump into that. Enough of my yippity yapping. I hope that gives you all a little context and know what's going on. Now I'm going to share my screen and let you all see what I'm actually talking about. Here we go. Essentially, just kind of giving it to you high level. So you can find this on the DoD website, and I'll put the link in the show notes. For the CMMC program, there are 3 levels. You have level 1. So that's if your organization is handling federal contract information. Then you have 15 requirements that maps to that FAR 21. That will be an annual self-attestation. As an organization, you just have to attest that the non-federal systems you're using to process, store, or transmit that FCI, that it meets those 15 requirements that maps to CMMC level 1. So that's the easy one for the most part. It's not a give me, but it's easier than once you graduate to level 2. That means your organization is handling CUI, controlled unclassified information. And then you're going to have to demonstrate that you're in compliance with all 110 requirements from this 800-171. And you're going to have 1 or 2 options. In that solicitation, it'll say a required CMMC level 2 self-assessment, or it's going to say a CMMC level 2 certification is required. And it's and essentially given if it says a self-assessment, that means on your systems you're going to perform a self-assessment against the 800-171 requirements and attest to DoD that you have met the requirements. However, if it says you have to have a certification, then that's going to require a CMMC third-party assessment organization to perform that certification assessments, that verification that you're actually in compliance. Now, the third level is going to be, you'll get a bonus 24 requirements, and that's going to still be controlled and classified information. However, it's likely going to be more sensitive in nature, and it's going to be a smaller number of defense contractors that meets that threshold. We're anticipating the vast majority of DoD contracts will require that level 2 certification assessment. I know that Stacy Bosjanik from the DoD CIO office, who's pretty much over the CMMC program, she mentioned that for level 2, requiring that self-assessment specifically, that's going to be a very small percentage of defense contractors. So don't hold your breath hoping that you're going to be able to be one of those very few select ones who can do a level 2 self-attestation. That's unlikely. And for that level 2, that's going to be every 3 years, triannually. You'll have to get that renewed every 3 years. And then whether it's a self-assessment or a certification assessment, you're still going to have to go into PI, the SPRS system, and attest annually that you're still in compliance. And level 3, those certifications are only going to be performed by the DIPCAC, the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center. That's a tongue twister, but that's basically DoD assessors who perform that level 3 assessment. You can only get that level 3 assessment once you have completed a level 2 assessment. The requirements are cumulative. Once you have met level 2, that means you've met level 1. And once you've met level 3, that means you met level 2. So that's the level setting to let you know what the CMMC program is. All right, so now you have understanding of that tiered model. Let's move right along to as far as understanding what are the overall requirements. Just goes more in detail of what I just outlined about the requirements. You have the level 1 self-assessment, level 2, then the level 2 C3PO assessment. Remember, that's that CMMC third-party assessment organization that will be performing that certification assessment. And then you have the level 3. So for that C3PO assessment, you can't just call up Joe Blow IT company or cybersecurity company. It has to be an authorized CMMC third-party assessment organization. That's going to be an organization who has undergone a NIST SP 800-171 assessment that the DIPCAC is going to be performing against the CMMC requirements. And then also they're going to be authorized through the Cyber AB. Only the Cyber AB can authorize C3PO. There you have it in terms of those fundamentals of the CMMC program. All that is outlined in the 32 CFR Part 170, that's CMMC program rule. That final rule went into effect in October of 2024. So that's what led the way to authorize those C3POs to start performing CMMC level 2 certification assessments, which have been underway since January of this year. In regards to this Title 48 rule, Part 204, that's what's going to lead the way for actually CMMC being in DoD solicitation. So just want to reiterate that. As of today, CMMC is not in any DoD solicitations. But once that Title 48 rule is final, anticipating probably within the next 60 to 90 days, that's going to change. We're going to start seeing CMMC in the actual DoD solicitations. So some key things to keep in mind for level 1, no POA&Ms are permitted. So plan of action and milestones as far as deficiencies, remediation, that's not permitted at level 1. You have to essentially attest that you have fully implemented all 15 requirements. And those requirements are found in the CMMC level 1 assessment guide, or you can go to the FAR 21 and see those same requirements. It's a 1-for-1 match. So you can have some POA&Ms as far as level 2 and level 3. Typically, it's going to be those requirements that have an impact on critical protections. So all of them can't be on for level 2 and level 3. And within the program rule, it identifies which ones can and which ones can't be on a POA&M. So as far as the SPRS score goes, each of the 110 requirements have a certain weight. Essentially, really the 1-pointers can be on a POA&M at level 2 and 3. However, there are exceptions for 2 of the requirements related to multi-factor authentication and FIPS validated encryption. Those are the 2 requirements that they're worth higher than 1 point, but they can't be on a POA&M with along with certain criteria. There you go as far as understanding that portion. Again, I'm just doing real high level. Definitely check out some other videos where I do a deep dive into all of this, but I wanted to just kind of give you a basis of what's going on. Why is there so much chatter and lots of posts about this on LinkedIn and webinar? Yeah, there's a whole hoopla going on since yesterday. I'll kind of break it all down for you, move the fluff for you, cut through all of the noise and the confusion. So this is what's really important. This probably is the crux of this whole video, what's most important. So once that Title 48 rule goes into effect, once it's a final rule, and again, based on the countdown, looking like it's going to be within the next 60 to 90 days where it's going to be final. Now DoD is going to begin their phase rollout, 4 phases over the next 3 years. So phase 1, once we have that effective date, maybe sometime September, October of this year, now we're going to have applicable solicitations will require level 1 and level 2 self-assessments. So we're going to see that in phase 1, where we're going to see those solicitations for DoD starting to say, okay, you have to have completed a level 1, CMMC level 1 or CMMC level 2 self-assessment. Those results have to be reported in the SPRS system, PI account. I have a full video on that where it shows you how to do that. Essentially, that's going to be the case. And then your organization bids on a solicitation that has this requirement in it for level 1 or level 2 self-assessment. If prior to award of that contract, if you don't have those results reported in SPRS, then you would now be eligible for that contract. Phase 2 is where it really heats up. So beginning 12 months after phase 1 start, now we'll have applicable solicitations will require a level 2 certification. That is where it gets fun, depending on what side of it you're on. But at that point, solicitations that say you have to have a level 2 certification, your organization can still bid on that contract without having that level 2 certification. However, if prior to award, if you haven't completed that level 2 certification, meaning you had a C3 PAO performing a certification assessment and you passed that assessment, perfect 110, no deficiencies, then you're not going to be eligible for award. That is high stakes. Stacey Boschanic always says that CMMC assessments are high-stake assessments. They absolutely are. Because if you can imagine as an organization, let's say you're contacted by that DoD contracting officers and they say, hey, we're ready to award you this multi-million-dollar DoD contract, but we're looking in SPRS and we don't see you have a certification for level 2. Is that accurate? And yeah, if you don't have that certification, you're not going to be eligible to be awarded. So they'll have to say, oh, sorry, we're going to have to reward it to your competitor. And I actually had a client that happened to, not for CMMC, but for NIST 800-171. So that is an existing requirement per the DFARS 7012 clause for DoD solicitations, but it's self-attestation at this point prior to the CMMC going into effect. And this client contacted me after they were contacted by a DoD contracting officer on a contract they bid on. Contractor officer was ready to award them that contract, and they found, it was like, okay, you haven't submitted your 800-171 self-assessment in SPRS, and that contractor didn't even know what that was. And at that point, it was just too late. Like, that was a requirement of that contract in order to be awarded it. They had to have that SPRS score filed. So I just want to draw the distinction. So right now, you can go into SPRS and you can submit a level 1 self-attestation, level 2 self-attestation, and you can submit a NIST 800-171 self-attestation. So the reason they lost that contract, in the example I just gave of my client that contacted me after this happened, is because they didn't have the 800-171 self-assessment on file. With the level 2 certification in SPRS, that's going to populate once the C3PO uploads your successful results into EMAS. Then that'll populate into SPRS and the contracting officers will be able to see that. Phase 3, 24 months after phase 1 start, we're going to have all applicable solicitations will require level 3 certification. So that's when we have that level 3. And that's remember the DoD DIPCAC can only once perform those certification assessments only after you've completed your level 2. So if you're bidding on a DoD solicitation and it says it needs a level 3, you don't have to get that level 2 first. Then you'll be eligible to contact DoD and say, okay, I'm ready for my level 3 now. Phase 4, this is when full implementation. At this point, 36 months after this Title 48 CFR rule goes into effect, CMMC is final, all DoD solicitations will include the applicable CMMC levels, whether that's level 1, 2, or 3. You'll know at the time you're bidding on that solicitation. We see in the fine print down here, some procurements, DoD may implement CMMC requirements in advance of the planned phase. Depending on how sensitive that work you're doing and performance of that contract, DoD, they'll have the authority to put CMMC into contracts before these planned phases. They're not restricted to sticking to these phases. Keep that in mind. That's a pretty big deal. those are the nuts and bolts of what's going on and why at least the CMMC assessors and consultants and like myself, I'm a lead CMMC certified assessor. It's been a lot of hurry up and wait with CMMC. This has really been underway since I believe 2020. As far as 801.701 requirements, they've been in effect since December 2017. But this DoD program has been in the rule-making process since 2020. It's been a long time in the making, and now DoD they're almost at the finish line. They can see it, it's in their sights, and it's go time. So if you're a defense contractor, then yeah, you need to be paying attention to this. This can be a matter of multi-million dollars. And I forgot to list the amount. The client that said that contacted me after they had lost that contract because they didn't have their 801.71 score on file. That was a $5 million contract for a small business. Yeah, that lady was devastated. That's you're dealing with DoD. This is the name of the game. CMMC is going to be the law of the land when it comes to cybersecurity compliance. It's a trust but verify program. They're no longer just taking your word for it that you're in compliance. You got to show them. If you need any support, I'm here to help you out. SPRS Cyber, we specialize in CMMC readiness. We support large and small organizations, and we can help accelerate this compliance process for you. And we offer fully managed CMMC level 1 and 2 solutions so that you can focus on building your business and innovating and not have to be bogged down with all this compliance hoopla. Feel free to reach out to us. Always happy to talk CMMC. There you have it. Countdown has begun.